Now let's move on to Link's Awakening. This we were talking a little bit about this coming out on the heels of last podcast. Now this is the remake of the old Game Boy game. This was the game that came out after A Link to the Past and was kind of made in the wake of it and like inspired by, but it also had a lot of different things going for it. I never played that original Game Boy game. Derrick, did you ever touch that?
Yes,
You
I
did?
did
Oh, okay.
play it on Game Boy.
Okay.
But I kind of like at first when I heard about it, I kind of got it mixed up with the Super Nintendo one.
Okay.
But
A
I
Link to the Past?
yeah, because I was
Okay.
like, when I first saw it, I was like, oh wow, this is what it is. And then I
No.
realized it was the one on the Game Boy. And I was like, no,
No.
but it's still one of my top like 3 Zelda games.
Okay. Yeah, it's quite a bit different than most of the what we're used to with Zelda. I mean, those early Zelda games were a lot different than what we're used to with Zelda anyway. But yeah, they Nintendo took this and they kind of rebuilt it from the ground up, but kept all of the quirks that made Link's Awakening memorable. And they gave it a really nice art style that is very colorful, very vibrant. It's kind of like a little. It's hard to describe the actual like look of the characters and stuff. They kind of got like their heads are a little bit too big for their bodies. They kind of look like Mii's from the Wii and Wii U, like Miiverse or whatever it was called. Like you could customize your face, and like it was very like the faces were the highlight and the bodies were a little bit simpler and smaller. And the art style that they're going for here is this thing that they call tilt shift. And I don't know if it's been in any other game before or if it's like some term they made up just for this, but it's like kind of like isometric, but it's isometric and the engine's 3D, and they kind of blur a vignette around Link wherever you're running around, and they kind of like obfuscate what's in the distance and what's in the foreground, and it kind of like focuses your eye right in the middle of the screen where Link is, and kind of has a cool effect. Doesn't really affect gameplay too much, but looks really cool. And yeah, I think the style that they went with is pretty good. Like the dungeon maps and architecture and stuff, I think looks really, really great, really sharp. I've been playing it mostly on in handheld mode, and it looks really great on the Switch's screen. And I think some of that kind of ended up backfiring with this game, and that it, especially in the overworld, has a lot of frame rate issues. Mostly when you're walking around the overworld and it's loading in a new area of the overworld, it kind of struggles to load in all of those assets, like whether or not there's going to be a bunch of enemies or a whole bunch of grass that you can cut down or a building or something like that. It just seems like it's not capable of loading that stuff in fast enough, and as a result the frame rate kind of drops quite a bit. I think it's mostly noticeable when you're going from an interior where the frame rate's like a solid 60 frames per second. Then you exit the building and it loads all of that information, and it just tanks the frame rate. And we're talking like definitely 30 frames per second, maybe even a little bit lower than that in a couple of spots when it's really struggling to load in. And this only really happens in the overworld. It doesn't, I haven't noticed it at all in any of the dungeons or the interiors or the caves or anything like that. So it's kind of at this point a bit of a bummer that it does this because this is Nintendo, right? You're expecting them to have like really solid performance on their own console, and I can only hope that they smooth that out, as it in a patch or something like that. I don't know if they've come out and said or anything to that extent, if they're going to do that or anything, but I hope they do. Now, Derrick, have you been noticing this as much as I have? Because for me, it's been kind of like there's one area in particular where there's like a swampy area. It's like water, and it was slow almost all the time there. Even when it wasn't loading in new stuff, it was like, I don't know if it was like the transparency of the water or something like that was just bogging it down.
Yeah, I noticed it around that same area you're talking about, and then when it kind of does like a harsh transition, like when it does like the full screen transition, like when you cut the thing to go into the forest and it kind of moves up, so you now see more of the forest.
Yeah.
Going back and forth there just lagged up a lot.
Yeah, it's kind of a bummer. So yeah, I mean, it's a little bit different in the way that it handles the overworld versus the dungeons, and I think it's different than the overworld is different than the way it handled it on the original Game Boy version, where it like in the dungeons, it's like a solid screen of the room you're in. So it loads everything in that room. There's some bigger rooms, I guess, but nothing super substantial. But in the overworld, the screen just kind of moves with Link, as opposed to loading a screen, you go to the edge of the screen and then it loads the next chunk of the overworld or something like that. And I just wonder if maybe like that would have alleviated that if they had stuck with that flow instead of allowing it to be like just a free roaming open world game. 'Cause I don't think it really necessarily would have lost or gained anything either way. Anyway, yeah, other than that, I think this is a pretty great game. It's definitely different than what we're used to with Zelda games. It's a little bit more free flowing. You aren't like, your objective isn't like slapped on the map and you just have to go find it. You're kind of like given clues on where you're supposed to go next and try to figure out how to get there based on the items you have and places you've been, to be like, oh yeah, so you gotta go north of the swamp or something like that, and that'll be where your next objective is. Then you gotta figure out how to get north of the swamp, and that's actually where the challenge comes in.
And then it like really wants you to revisit areas as well too.
Yeah, you'll be revisiting areas because the map really isn't that big. It's not like a huge giant, like certainly not Breath of the Wild but even like Ocarina of Time size. It's pretty small, but it's very dense. Like there's a lot of things to find and uncover all over the place. And one of the cool things that they did here is they kind of took a thing from Breath of the Wild, in that you can mark your map with your own icons. So you can go in and you can put down symbols on your map to represent things that you want to remember and go back to later. So like if you find a wall that looks like it can be bombed, you can put an icon there if you don't have bombs at the moment to remember to go back and blow that wall up later on. So that's kind of like how they balance out the, kind of not really giving you a waypoint to go to. They kind of let you kind of find your own way and revisit areas that you want to revisit based on things you find and the new abilities you get, which is pretty cool. How far have you gotten? Like how many dungeons in are you, or what was the last thing you did?
I'm just like up in the swamp now, kind of exploring around. I haven't really got to play much after I did the stream on it.
Oh, okay.
but I was also having problems with my Switch, so I kind of got that sorted out. So now I can go back and actually start going through and enjoying it.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I did notice, because I was playing in docked mode when we were doing the stream for it,
Mm-hmm.
the blur that's around the outsides of your screen that you really don't notice too much when you're playing in handheld mode
Yeah.
is absolutely horrible on your TV. Because it goes from being like this thin, non-noticeable line that kind of helps the game flow on the screen when it's smaller, but
Yeah.
on the TV, it's like 2 to 3 inches worth of blur all the way around. So
Yeah,
it was kind
it's
of
definitely more noticeable on the TV than it is on handheld
yeah,
mode.
yeah. It really caught me off guard at first because I was like, "Is it like this in handheld mode? Like,
Yeah.
what's going on here?" But
I don't know if it's the screen size or what, but I also seem to notice the frame rate drop less in handheld mode than I did in docked mode. I don't know if it's actually less, but or if it's just like the fact that I'm looking at a smaller screen or something like that. But I did feel like it was at least less noticeable in handheld mode.
mhm.
But yeah, that screen, I'm like of two minds on the screen blur thing. Like I think they should. I don't know if they should have done it or if they should allow you to toggle it on or off or something like that. I don't really know because it can be distracting. And it doesn't really.
Serve a real purpose.
No, it doesn't really serve a real purpose, and I'm not sure that it makes the game look better. I think it would have been probably better if they had just maybe like naturally made like a depth of field for the distance areas like behind
Mhm.
Link as opposed to also blurring in front of him. Because it doesn't look natural. It looks like it looks like a vignette. Like if you were to put like a dark vignette around a picture or something like that, it
Yeah.
looks like that except it's blurry. So it doesn't look like it's like a camera lens effect or something like that. It looks like it's like post processed added on afterward. And yeah, it looks cool in like a video or a screenshot or something like, oh, that looks kind of cool. But then when you're actually playing it, you're like, I don't know if I really like this. Yeah, and I just like the quirkiness of the game. Like they're mixing in like literally chain chomps and goombas, and there are 2D Mario style areas in the game. Like
Yep.
you'll go
I love
down
those.
some stairs, and then it'll be a 2D side scrolling Mario where you gotta jump on Goomba's heads, and there's piranha plants shooting fireballs at you and stuff. It's kind of crazy.
Mhm.
And I don't know, like, I don't know if they're like gonna explain it at some point, or if it's just gonna be like a just roll
I
with it
think
kind of deal.
I think it's the whole thing because you're dreaming and you're trying to wake up the windfish to come out of this. I think if they did explain it, it would probably tie in with that somehow.
Yeah. Yeah. So pretty good. Not a little bit a bummer on the technical end, but I think a solid Zelda game nonetheless, and at least something a little bit different while we wait for the next big giant Zelda release. And kind of very comparable in my opinion to Cadence of Hyrule, which came out earlier this year. And I'm not sure which one I like better because Cadence of Hyrule was very good. I guess I'm gonna have to keep playing this and see where it goes before I can make that call. But interesting that we've got two 2D Zelda games. Cadence of Hyrule definitely taking, I feel like, a little bit more from A Link to the Past than Link's Awakening, though. I wonder if they'll do like a full remake of Link's Awakening. I mean, Link to the
Links to
Past.
the past. I would love it if they did.
That'd be pretty cool. I mean, they just put out the SNES games on the online, so I don't know if they'll be doing that anytime soon. All right,
Yeah,
so that was what was that?
I was just gonna say, yeah, and they've kind of been bringing a lot of like games like that up into the store now because with Dragon Quest they just released 1, 2, and 3,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like out of nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah, the Dragon Quest 11 came out on Switch too.
Yep.
I played the demo. There's a demo of that. Oh, there's a demo of Ori and the Blind Forest too, if you're interested in checking it out before you buy. But I played the Dragon Quest 11 demo, and it looks really nice, but I just can't do turn-based combat. I just can't do it.
Nope.
All right, so that was Link's Awakening. Pretty good, if not for the frame rate. And I think I'd recommend picking it up.
Yeah, I definitely would too.
Thank you for joining us in this very special episode of Voxel Viewpoint. If you'd like to hear or see more, please consider subscribing to us on your favorite podcast app, subscribing to us on YouTube, or visiting voxelvoice.com, where all of our great content comes together in one place. Also check out the Voxel Voice Facebook group, where you can join in on the discussion with a great, like-minded community.